Yeah, we're talking about a grown man that was so jealous that his 9-year-old daughter was making more money than him that he decided that she shouldn't live anymore. Judith Barcy was an American child actress in the 80s, so today's case is in 1998 in LA, California. Judith's mom, Maria, was originally from Hungary, but she's now living in LA and she's working as a waitress. Maria always had dreams of being famous. She loved the idea of being successful in the Hollywood world. While she was working as a waitress, she met a man called Joseph Barcy. He was also from Hungary. Joseph walks into the restaurant Maria's working at, and as soon as she sees him, she thinks that he is so charming. Joseph had actually been married before. He lived in France previously, and that's where he met his first wife, and they had 2 children together. After that, he moved to New York. He moves to New York with his wife and his kids. Their relationship eventually becomes toxic. His character would change almost on impulse. He just became a very angry person, and eventually that turned into physical violence. He began threatening his wife and his children, and eventually when the kids got older, they would go to the mom and say that they were scared of their dad. For the children's sake, his first wife makes the decision to leave him and they get a divorce. But when Maria met Joseph, she had no idea about his past. It's now 1997. Joseph and Maria get married and they start a family. June 6, 1978, they have their first baby, a baby girl that they named Judith Barcy. Joseph wants Maria to be a stay-at-home mom. Maria is very happy with this. She likes the idea of just staying home and taking care of Judith. Maria was over the moon to have a little girl. Judith was described to have the manners of an angel. She just had the cutest little personality. She loved being outside, loved playing with her friends, and was just a sweet little girl. At this point in her life, Maria had realized and come to terms with that she probably was never going to be famous, but now that she had this little girl, she could make her famous. During their time at home, Maria started almost training Judith to be a little actress, but Judith had so much fun doing it. They would practice roles and do things like that, and Judith was loving it. When Judith was 5, the family was at an ice skating rink. There was a TV crew there filming a different commercial. They approached Judith and tell her that she would be good for a commercial they're filming. They end up getting her an agent the very next day. She gets hired for that commercial, and then she gets hired for a lot more. By the time that Judith started 4th grade, she was earning over $100,000 a year, which was a good thing. Her parents were happy. Judith was happy. She loved what she was doing, so she kept doing it. As Judith is continuing her career as an actress, the family eventually moves from an apartment to a 3-bedroom house in West Hills, LA. Judith was in a lot of different things. If you were a 90s baby, you either recognize her in movies or her voice, because she also did a lot of voice acting as well. She was in Jaws, The Revenge, Twilight Zone, Growing Pains, and she played the voice in The Land Before Time and All Dogs Go to Heaven. Her career is growing fast. She's well known. Directors say that she's an absolute pleasure to work with and a very talented girl. This is when her father, Joseph, starts growing bitter about her success. He's jealous. He starts making snarky little comments referring to her as a spoiled brat, giving her the cold shoulder almost. And she's just a little girl. She's probably like so confused as to why her father is being an This grown man didn't know how to handle the jealousy that he had towards his daughter, so his behavior was different. He became extremely controlling, started getting in trouble with the law. He would pick fights with people in public, was just kind of immature, if I do say so. That kind of behavior probably would not have come as a surprise to his ex-wife, but to Maria, this was shocking. She never knew this version of him. Might I add that Joseph was also cheating on Maria, also the lighting. The natural lighting does its own thing. I don't know. Joseph would often cheat on Maria. He had full-on girlfriends and was fully in other relationships very often. So he's now this whole different version of him, and he starts making jokes to his friends that he is going to kill his daughter and his wife. Maria would share these stories of him being violent and being aggressive with her family and friends as well, but she talked about it almost casually and so often that everyone just accepted that that's how he was. At this time, Judith was still attending public school, and she would tell her friends these stories about how her father would threaten her and her mom. Her friends would get scared to play with Judith. They did not want to knock on her door and ask to play with her because her dad was known as being this big, mean man. December 1986, Judith is 8 years old, and Maria files a police report saying that Joseph was physically abusing her, threatening to end her life, but she ended up dropping the charges and nothing ever came from that. And when I say aggressive, he would throw things at them, he would pull their hair, he would often have bruises and black eyes, which is so horrible and so sad. And of course, as we see often, he was not always mean. He would do these mean things and then he would feel bad and try and buy them stuff to make up for it. Joseph Barcy became paranoid that Judith and her mom Maria would one day not come home because they would travel a lot for Judith to go film these movies. A lot of times, more often than not, they were out of town, so he started becoming legitimately apparently scared that one day they would just decide to not come home. When Judith is 9 years old, her and Maria go to the Bahamas to film for Jaws. Right before they left, Joseph walked into his daughter's room, put a knife up to her neck, and said, "If you and your mom don't come home, I'm gonna cut your throat," and then walked out of the room. What's up with the lighting? I don't understand. They go film. They're at the Bahamas. Maria's opening up to the other moms on the trip about Joseph and his actions and what he's like. The moms are encouraging Maria to leave him. She would say, "Yeah, I think I'm going to," and then change her mind and say, I can't. After the Bahamas, they decide to make a pit stop in New York to go see Maria's brother. And they're there for a few days. Joseph finds out that they stopped there instead of coming straight home. Joseph calls Maria, asks to speak to Judith, and says, "Do you remember what I told you?" when he went to her room and held the knife up to her neck. They eventually come home, and Maria tries a new tactic now. Maria's thinking, if I can't leave him, then I'm gonna make him want to leave me. She stops putting effort into her appearance. She's not cleaning, not taking care of herself, doing everything possible for Joseph to think, I can't do this anymore, and for him to leave them. At this time, Judith is still working. Her agent that would go to auditions with her started noticing unusual behavior. She could tell that something was wrong. Judith would start crying randomly. She was picking at her eyelashes, would start getting these anxious tendencies. Her agent decides to schedule Judith an appointment with a child psychologist. When they met, the psychologist could immediately tell that she was experiencing not only mental but also physical abuse. The psychologist calls CPS, Child Protective Services. They bring in Maria and say, "Hey, what's going on?" Maria tells them everything about how horrible Joseph is. She says, "He is horrible, but don't worry, I'm going to leave him. I've actually started renting an apartment that Joseph doesn't know about that we're going to be moving into." She's slowly moving things from the house into the apartment, slowly enough so that Joseph doesn't notice, getting everything ready for when they eventually do leave him, and she's going to be asked for a divorce. The social worker believed Maria, so the case was closed. Maria had gotten an apartment and she was getting ready to leave Joseph. She just kind of was scared. She had a lot of encouragement from her neighbors and her friends supporting the plan for her to escape, and she was, I think, planning on it, but just never got to. One of the days where she's slowly moving things from the house to the apartment, Joseph sees her packing up stuff and follows her there. Maria plays it off surprisingly well, and Joseph does believe her. Maria says that it's her friend's apartment and she's just helping her move. Although Joseph believes her, he has now seen the apartment. He now knows the location and the address, and that scares Maria. She's second guessing everything now. She's getting into her head about how scary leaving him could actually get. One day in July 1988, Judith is at a family friend's house. They're watching her for the night, and she says that she's scared to go home. She doesn't want to go home because Daddy always threatens to kill Mommy. That gives me serious chills. Later that month, July 25th, 1988, Judith spends the day hanging out, playing outside, riding her bike. That night, Maria tucks her into bed. Maria gets ready to go to bed. Joseph is just watching TV on the couch. He's watching TV, but what he's really doing is he's waiting for Maria and Judith to fall asleep. Once he thinks that they are asleep, he goes into his closet and grabs a... He walks into her daughter's room while she's sleeping in her bed, points the gun at her head, and her. The noise is so loud, it wakes up Maria. She jumps out of bed and starts running down the hallway to go into Judith's room. She bumps into Joseph in the hallway. There's some sort of struggle there, some sort of fight, pushing each other, and eventually Joseph shoots Maria in the head. He has now just killed his wife and his daughter. He doesn't touch their bodies. He just leaves them lying there and goes to sleep. Goes to bed. That next morning, Judith's agent gets notified that she didn't show up that day to film. The agent calls the household to speak to Joseph. He picks up the phone and says, "I'm not sure where they are. So I know that a car picked up Judith and Maria this morning, but I actually don't know much because we are separated and I moved out." July 27th, 1998, 2 days after the murders, around 7:30 in the morning, a neighbor, an older lady, hears a loud, almost explosion sound coming from the Barcy household. She then sees fire and she calls 911 to report it. When the fire department arrived, they walked in and found 3 dead bodies. Judith Barcy was only 10 years old when she was found dead. Maria Barcy was only 48 years old when she was found dead. Joseph Barcy had taken his own life at 55 years old. There was gasoline found all over the house as well as all over Judith's and Maria's body. Joseph had himself to end his own life. Yeah, that is the story of Judith Barcy. Thank you for hanging out with me today and for spending the time to listen to the video. Let me know what you guys think. I love you so much. Big kiss on the forehead for every single one of you.